A single gunshot shattered the quiet of the mansion. The echo lingered in the marble halls like a ghost refusing to leave. Don Mateo's body collapsed onto the floor, his hand trembling as it reached for his phone. The message he sent was short, almost poetic in its horror. "It's done. The king is dead." The light from the phone cast a pale glow on his lifeless face, and for a moment it felt as if time had stopped breathing. Adrian stepped into the doorway, frozen. The scent of gunpowder mixed with the sweetness of spilled wine filled the air. His eyes darted across the room. The broken glass, the overturned chair, the blood pooling beneath the chandelier. His mind screamed to run, but his feet stayed still. "Who did this?" he whispered, though no answer came. The weight of the moment pressed down on him. Don Mateo had built this empire with iron and blood. Now it was collapsing before his eyes. The family would soon turn on itself. The message buzzed again. A second text. "The king is dead. The war begins." Adrian's pulse quickened. This wasn't an execution. It was a declaration. And somewhere, hidden in the shadows, the real warlord was smiling. He looked once more at Don Mateo, and something inside him snapped. Revenge? Justice? He couldn't tell the difference anymore. The night had only begun, and the empire's bones would soon rattle. The rain began to fall by dawn. The city felt different now, quieter, colder. Adrian sat in his car outside the mansion, watching police lights flicker against puddles. The world that once revolved around Don Mateo had lost its sun. His thoughts raced. Every deal, every betrayal, every secret whispered in dark rooms. Someone had planned this too perfectly. The empire wasn't just collapsing, it was being dismantled. He gripped the steering wheel. He'd been a soldier once, loyal to the family. Now, loyalty meant nothing. "Was I next?" he muttered, staring at his reflection in the rear-view mirror. For the first time, he saw fear, not of death, but of the truth. Somewhere out there, the betrayer was already watching. The phone buzzed again. A message? "Don't trust anyone." His heart sank. The storm outside grew louder, the thunder blending with his heartbeat. He started the engine. It was time to find out who was still loyal and who had signed his death warrant. The rain hadn't stopped by noon. Adrian met Luca in a dim cafe hidden behind fogged windows. The smell of burnt coffee filled the air. Luca leaned forward and whispered, "They're cleaning house." "No one's safe." Adrian didn't flinch. "I need names," he said quietly. Luca shook his head. "Names will get us killed." The hum of the espresso machine masked their fear. Adrian's mind drifted to memories of nights spent guarding Don Mateo's life, of loyalty sworn in blood. That loyalty now felt like a noose tightening around his neck. Luca's trembling hand reached across the table, passing a folded note. "You didn't hear it from me," he said. Adrian tucked it into his jacket, eyes scanning the cafe. The walls felt like they were listening. As Luca stood to leave, he glanced back once. "You're chasing ghosts, my friend. Some truths are meant to stay buried." The bell above the door rang softly as he disappeared into the storm. Adrian sat alone, the note heavy in his pocket. The war had begun, and this time, he didn't know which side he was on. That night, Adrian drove to the docks. The fog rolled thick over the water, swallowing the city lights. He met Vincenzo near the cargo crates, the man who had once sworn to protect Don Mateo's bloodline. Vincenzo's eyes were cold, calculating. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "Neither should you," Adrian replied. The air stank of oil and salt. "You think you know who did it?" Vincenzo asked. Adrian's silence was enough of an answer. The enforcer stepped closer, his voice low. "The family isn't what it used to be. Be careful who you call brother." his words cut like a knife. Adrian watched him walk away into the fog. The sound of the waves crashed against the pier. He took out the note Luca had given him. A single name written in red ink, Isabella. His chest tightened. The ghost of the past had returned. Adrian returned to his apartment before dawn. The city was quiet. Too quiet. He poured whiskey into a glass and stared at the note again. Isabella. His chest burned with memories. She had been more than family. She had been his heart, his downfall. The phone buzzed once more. A new message appeared. Meet me where it all began. His pulse raced. The street outside shimmered with rain as he slipped on his jacket. He looked into the mirror, at eyes that no longer belonged to the same man. He whispered, "If this is war, then let it burn." The sound of distant sirens filled the air as he stepped out. Somewhere in the darkness, someone was already waiting. Adrian ran through the crowded street, the echo of footsteps behind him. The rain hit the pavement like gunfire, neon lights flickering through puddles. He glanced over his shoulder. 2 black cars followed, headlights slicing through the mist. Panic clawed at his chest, but he couldn't stop now. Someone had leaked his location. "You set me up!" he shouted into the phone. Luca's voice cracked with fear. "It wasn't me, Adrian. They're everywhere." The sound of tires screeched nearby. A market stall toppled as Adrian pushed through the crowd, heart pounding. He could hear sirens, but none were coming to save him. He ducked into an alley, breathing hard, his jacket soaked and heavy. Somewhere, behind the roaring city noise, he could swear he heard laughter. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the note. Isabella, his pulse quickened. If she was part of this, then everything he knew was a lie. He pressed his back to the cold wall, hand gripping the gun beneath his coat. "Come on, show yourself," he whispered. Then he saw it, a red laser dot gliding across the brick beside him. The chase had only begun. Adrian slammed the safe house door behind him, breath ragged. The room smelled of dust and secrets. Luca sat on the couch, eyes wide, hands shaking. "You brought them here," he whispered. Adrian threw the gun onto the table. "They already knew," he said. "Someone's feeding them every move we make." The rain outside drummed against the windows. For a brief moment, silence filled the room. Adrian poured 2 glasses of whiskey, his hand trembling. Luca hesitated, then asked, "You think it's Isabella?" Adrian's stare was cold. "I don't think. I know." Lightning flashed, casting their shadows on the peeling wallpaper. "You don't get it," Luca muttered. "She's not the only one after you." Adrian's heart skipped. "Then who is?" The storm outside roared louder. Somewhere in that thunder, a truth waited to strike. In the heart of the city, Vincenzo met Isabella in a high-rise penthouse, overlooking the storm. She poured herself a drink, eyes calm but sharp. "He knows," she said. Vincenzo smirked. "Good. Let him run. Fear makes people predictable." He walked toward the window, city lights reflecting off his cold features. "You're playing a dangerous game," Isabella murmured. "I always do," he replied. The tension between them was electric, dangerous, and unspoken. She stepped closer, voice low. "You think you can control this?" Vincenzo turned to her slowly. "Control is an illusion, but power is what survives." She smiled faintly, hiding her fear. He leaned closer, whispering, "Find him before he finds me." The thunder outside echoed like applause. Somewhere in the dark city below, Adrian was already on his way. Adrian found Father Emilio in the old cathedral, the air heavy with incense and grief. The priest looked older now, tired eyes glistening in candlelight. "You shouldn't have come," Emilio said quietly. "You taught me loyalty," Adrian replied. "Now I need truth." They sat beneath the stained glass, colors flickering across their faces. Don Mateo built his empire on lies, Emilio whispered. He wasn't the king, he was the puppet. Adrian frowned. Then who pulled the strings? The priest hesitated. You already know her name. Adrian's chest tightened. Isabella. The candles flickered violently, as if reacting to the name. Emilio placed a hand on his shoulder. Revenge doesn't heal the soul. It consumes it. Adrian looked away. Then maybe I'm already gone. The church bells tolled, each sound like a heartbeat fading into darkness. Adrian drove through the night, the city fading behind him. Every word from Emilio echoed in his mind. Isabella wasn't just part of the betrayal. She was the bloodline. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. The truth burned like fire in his chest. He stopped at an abandoned warehouse, headlights cutting through the dust. Inside, files were spread across a metal table. Bank records, photos, names. And there she was, Isabella smiling beside Don Mateo in a photo marked family. His heart froze. All this time, he whispered. The phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You were never supposed to find this. His grip on the phone trembled. Then footsteps echoed behind him. He turned slowly, gun in hand, breath heavy. A silhouette stood in the doorway. We need to talk. A familiar voice said. The game had changed, and this time, blood ties meant nothing. The apartment was quiet, almost too quiet. Adrian sat at the table, the light from the single lamp casting long shadows. His fingers tapped the edge of his glass, the only sound breaking the stillness. Isabella stood by the window, her silhouette framed by the glow of the city lights. We're safe for now, she said softly, turning to face him. But Adrian couldn't shake the feeling gnawing at him. Her calmness seemed rehearsed, like a mask hiding something darker. She smiled, but her eyes didn't match. They were cold, distant, as though her mind was somewhere else entirely. He wanted to ask, to demand answers, but he didn't. Not yet. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, watching her. You're sure they're not following us? He asked, trying to sound casual, but the words felt forced. She gave a small nod, but the hesitation lingered in her response. For now, she said. The tension between them felt tangible. Something was wrong, but what? Adrian's gut told him to stay alert. There was more to her than the face she showed. And somewhere, deep down, he feared he was about to learn the hard way. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken words hanging in the air. Adrian studied her, trying to read the truth behind her calm demeanor. We're in this together, right? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She turned toward him, her expression softening for just a second. Oh, of course, she replied, but the pause between her words felt too long. I don't know who to trust anymore, he confessed, a vulnerability in his voice he rarely allowed to surface. Her hand reached across the table, brushing against his. You can trust me, Adrian, she said, her fingers lingering on his for a moment longer than necessary. But as her hand withdrew, something shifted in the air. A faint tension rose between them, and Adrian noticed how she avoided his gaze. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Was it fear or something else? He leaned in, searching her face for any sign of deception. Isabella, are you hiding something from me? The room seemed to grow colder as she stepped back, her eyes flickering toward the door. Nothing, she said, her voice trembling slightly. The silence between them stretched, full of doubt and unspoken truths. Adrian found himself face to face with Vincenzo in an old warehouse on the edge of town. The man had always been the enforcer, cold and unyielding, but today there was something different about him. You think you can fix this? Vincenzo asked, his tone mocking. Fix what? Adrian shot back, feeling his anger rise. This mess you've gotten us into. The Empire's falling apart, and you're chasing ghosts. Vincenzo's eyes narrowed. You don't get it, do you? There's no redemption in this world, only power, and you've forgotten that. Adrian's pulse quickened. I'm not like you. Vincenzo chuckled darkly. You will be. You already are. The words hit harder than Adrian expected. Was this how Don Matteo had seen the world? Was he falling into the same trap, the same endless cycle of violence and greed? Vincenzo's eyes bored into his, as though he could see through Adrian's very soul. You think you're different, but you're not. You're just as much a part of this world as I am. You'll see. The revelation came like a slap to the face. Adrian stood in the middle of the room, his gun aimed at Isabella, his heart pounding. You've been playing me all along, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Isabella's face twisted in sorrow, but there was no denying it. You think I wanted this, she whispered back, her voice trembling with emotion. I didn't have a choice. I never did. She stepped closer, her eyes pleading for understanding. Don Matteo's empire isn't what you think it is. It's built on lies, on blood, on... Adrian's hand shook as he kept the gun pointed at her. Then why? His voice cracked. Why pretend? The silence between them was thick, filled with the weight of their shared past. Isabella's lips parted. But before she could speak, the door behind them burst open, and Vincenzo's men flooded the room. Adrian barely had time to react. The betrayal, the heartbreak, struck in that instant, and in the chaos that followed, everything he thought he knew crumbled. Adrian sat alone in the dark, his mind racing. The cold metal of the gun still gripped tightly in his hand. How did I let this happen? He wondered. Isabella's betrayal burned in his chest like a wound that refused to heal. Outside, the city continued on, oblivious to the chaos he had just endured. The silence of the empty room was deafening. Adrian's hand trembled as he lit a cigarette, the smoke curling up toward the ceiling. Was this really the end? Or was there something more he needed to understand? The answers he knew were hidden in the web of lies spun by Don Matteo's empire. And now, the truth had to come out. With a deep breath, Adrian stood up. It wasn't over, not yet, and he would burn everything to the ground if he had to. The silence of the room was overwhelming. Adrian sat at the table, the last echo of the door slamming still ringing in his ears. The weight of Isabella's betrayal crushed him. How could I have been so blind? The air felt thick, as if every breath took more effort than the last. The only sound was the drip of water from the leaky pipe above, rhythmically punctuating the stillness. He ran his fingers through his hair, trying to piece it all together. The pieces of the puzzle had never seemed so scattered, so distant. How long had they been plotting? The questions piled up, but no answers came. His mind was a storm of confusion, but something told him the truth was just around the corner. He stared at the photo on the wall. Don Matteo's smiling face, his empire seemingly untouchable. The facade had crumbled, and with it Adrian's world. But in the cracks of this broken empire, a hidden truth began to flicker. It's not over yet, he thought. The past had deceived him, but now the real war was just beginning. The flashes of memory hit like waves crashing against the shore. Adrian sat in the back seat of the car, Isabella beside him, her smile radiant. But there was something off about that night. He could still remember the heat of the city streets, the way her laugh had echoed in the back of his mind, masking the fear that lingered behind her eyes. The phone call that had come through that night was the turning point. He could hear Don Matteo's voice in his head. If you want to protect this family, you need to stay loyal. But loyalty to what? To whom? Adrian closed his eyes, hearing the echoes of his past decisions. each one leading him closer to this revelation. Isabella had been a pawn, he realized. No, she was more than that. She was the game. The realization hit him with the weight of an avalanche. The betrayal had always been within reach. He had just failed to see it. Adrian's breath caught when he saw Vincenzo standing in the doorway. The man who had once been a mentor, a trusted ally, now stood before him as a symbol of everything that had gone wrong. The room was tense, charged with unspoken words. Vincenzo stepped forward slowly, his eyes piercing through Adrian's defenses. "You know the truth now," Vincenzo said quietly, almost sympathetically. Adrian's heart raced as his grip tightened on the gun at his side. "You knew all along," Adrian spat, the anger rising like a tidal wave. Vincenzo nodded. "The truth has a way of coming to light when it's ready. But what you don't understand is that I never wanted to destroy you." Adrian's mind raced, torn between the desire for justice and the weight of betrayal. "Then why?" Adrian asked, voice thick with emotion. Vincenzo's eyes softened, and for a moment he seemed human again. "Because you were never meant to lead this empire. You were meant to be its downfall." Vincenzo's words echoed in Adrian's mind like a mantra. It was always about control, Adrian. Don Matteo was just the face. The real power was never in his hands. Adrian's stomach churned as he tried to process the revelation. "So who?" he demanded. Vincenzo smiled coldly, his gaze unwavering. "You think the family you've sworn loyalty to was built on loyalty to was built on loyalty?" He stepped closer, his voice low and self-assured. "It was built on manipulation, on blood, on power. And now you're in it too." Adrian's chest tightened as the walls seemed to close in. "No," he thought, "this is wrong." But the truth had already begun to unravel. The family, the empire, it had all been a lie. The anger that surged through him felt cold, calculated. The enemy wasn't just Vincenzo. It was everything he had ever known, and the realization hit him. There is no loyalty in this world. Only power. Adrian stood alone in the rain, the cold wind biting at his skin. The weight of everything that had happened pressed down on him like a mountain. He thought of Isabella, of the lies of the empire that had built him and then destroyed him. So this was the truth all along, he thought. He had been a pawn in a game far bigger than himself, and now he was left with nothing but the bitter taste of betrayal. But there was something in him that had shifted. A fire, a purpose, a resolve. The rain poured harder, but Adrian stood firm, his mind made up. The game was no longer about survival. It was about rewriting the rules. The world had shown him its true face. And now, it was time to strike back. He turned, his eyes hardening with determination. The path ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain. The war had just begun. The heavy silence of the empty warehouse was broken only by the distant hum of the city. Adrian's heartbeat echoed in his ears as he moved through the dark, his eyes scanning the shadows. The air was thick with the smell of oil and rust, cold against his skin. He gripped the gun tightly, fingers stiff. The weight of his decision hung over him. His breath was shallow, every movement calculated. This is it, he thought. The end of the road. A door creaked open, and the sound sent a shiver through him. He wasn't alone. From the darkness, Vincenzo's silhouette emerged, a predator in his element. "You're late," Vincenzo's voice rang out, cool and steady. Adrian didn't answer, he just watched. "We've been waiting for you, Adrian?" Vincenzo continued, stepping closer. Adrian's jaw clenched. No more running, he thought. The confrontation was inevitable. And now, there would be no turning back. "You don't have to do this," Vincenzo said, his tone surprisingly soft, as if trying to convince Adrian to put down the gun. Adrian shook his head, anger burning through him. "You ruined everything," he spat. "You ruined me. Vincenzo's eyes glinted with a mixture of amusement and pity. You think you can stop this? You think you're different? You're just like the rest of us, consumed by power, by loyalty, by fear. Adrian's breath came faster now. I'm nothing like you. The words felt hollow, but they were the only defense he had left. Vincenzo smiled, his voice calm as ever. You will be, eventually. You already are. In a flash, Vincenzo lunged. The sound of footsteps pounding against the floor broke the stillness. Adrian fired, but Vincenzo was already gone, his figure blending with the shadows. The chase had begun, but the stakes were higher now. Everything they had fought for, everything they had believed, was about to collapse. The struggle was brutal. Adrian's body ached from the blows he had taken. Vincenzo's men were everywhere now, but there was a stillness in the chaos, a quiet before the storm. Adrian's eyes locked onto Isabella, who stood across the room, staring at him with a mixture of guilt and helplessness. She had been his world, and now she was the reason it was crumbling. Why? He breathed, stepping toward her, his voice cracking. Isabella's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't move. I had no choice, Adrian, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the noise of the fight. Adrian's heart sank. The betrayal wasn't just from Vincenzo, it was from her too. The woman he loved had played him from the beginning. She was part of the scheme, the very thing that had turned his world upside down. Before he could react, the explosion rocked the building, sending him to the ground. Pain exploded through his chest. His vision blurred, but he could still see Isabella, standing there, helpless. It was too late now. The price had been paid. Adrian stumbled to his feet, his heart pounding in his chest. He saw Vincenzo in front of him, standing with his arms crossed, a cold smile on his lips. You're too weak to win this, Vincenzo said, his voice low and mocking. Adrian wiped the blood from his mouth, a fire in his eyes. I'm not fighting for victory anymore. I'm fighting for survival. Vincenzo raised an eyebrow. Survival? You think you can survive this world? You think you can outsmart me? Adrian's voice grew stronger. I don't need to outsmart you. I just need to survive long enough to destroy everything you built. The warehouse was quiet again, except for the sound of their breaths. The air was thick with tension, the weight of their words hanging between them. Then, without warning, Adrian charged, the final act of defiance. The world spun as he closed the distance between them, and everything, the past, the lies, the bloodshed, led to this moment. The silence that followed was deafening. Adrian stood over Vincenzo's lifeless body, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The room was a mess of destruction, broken walls, shattered glass, and the smell of blood. This was the end, Adrian realized. But it didn't feel like a victory. He looked around at the destruction, the lives ruined, and the betrayal that had cost him everything. The war had ended, but at what price? Was it worth it? The past had been erased, but the scars would remain forever. Isabella's voice echoed in his mind. You're too good for this world, he had believed her. But now, standing in the wreckage, he wasn't sure anymore. His hands trembled as he looked at them, the ruins of an empire that was never his to build. So this was it, he thought. The price of survival. The world he had fought to protect had slipped through his fingers, but in that loss, something new had been born. A man who no longer sought revenge, but peace. The warehouse was still. No more explosions, no more gunshots. Just the distant hum of the city, quiet and indifferent. Adrian stood in the center, the aftermath of the battle scattered around him. The air was thick with dust, the light from the broken windows casting long shadows across the debris. His body was bruised, his mind a whirlwind of loss and realization. The cold silence enveloped him, as if the world had decided to pause, allowing him to breathe for the first time in what felt like forever. He looked around, but it was all empty now. The fight was over. Everything I knew is gone, Adrian thought, his gaze lingering on the spot where Vincenzo had fallen. The empire was in ruins, and with it, the life he had fought so hard to protect. The only thing left was the weight of the choices he had made. For a moment he felt nothing but numbness. The world had changed, but he remained broken, but alive. He took a deep breath, letting the quiet settle in. He had survived, but at what cost? Adrian sat on the cold concrete floor, his hands trembling as he lit a cigarette. His eyes drifted to the photo of his family on the ground, a reminder of everything he had lost. He thought of the people who had been part of his life, the bonds they shared. He wondered if they were still alive in some small corner of his heart. The images of Isabella, Vincenzo, Don Matteo, all of them played in his mind like a slideshow, each one a chapter of his broken past. Had I ever really known them? He asked himself. Or was I just part of their game? The smoke curled around him, a metaphor for the past that refused to leave. The memories were fading, but the pain remained. He let the silence engulf him again. Life goes on, he thought. But nothing will ever be the same. Adrian was startled by a soft voice behind him. I thought you were gone, he whispered. He turned to see Isabella standing at the doorway, her face pale, eyes filled with regret. The sight of her made his chest tighten. She was a ghost of the past, and yet here she was, still part of his world. I couldn't leave you like this, she said quietly, her voice trembling. I never wanted it to be like this. She trailed off, as if the words couldn't find their place. Adrian met her gaze, his heart heavy with conflicting emotions. The pain was still there, but something else was too, a need for closure, for understanding. I don't know if I can forgive you, he said, his voice breaking. But maybe I can let go. Isabella stepped forward, her hand reaching out. Adrian, but he turned away, his heart aching. Don't. It's over. It's all over. The room was silent again, but this time it was filled with a strange sense of peace. As Adrian walked through the remnants of the warehouse, he thought of Father Emilio. The old priest's words echoed in his mind. Loyalty is a chain, Adrian. You must learn to break it. The truth had been there all along, buried beneath the promises of power and revenge. The past was full of mistakes, but it was also full of lessons. Adrian paused by the broken window, looking out at the world beyond. What was the point of it all, he thought. What had I fought for? The answer was clearer now. It wasn't about revenge or the empire or the family he had lost. It was about choosing to live, despite everything. A soft smile tugged at the corner of his lips as he recalled Father Emilia's final words. You can always change if you're willing to face the truth. Adrian took a deep breath. I'm ready, he thought. The world had changed, and so had he. Adrian stood at the edge of the city. The skyline stretched out before him. The world seemed to have stopped moving, but he knew better. It was just waiting for him to move forward. He took a deep breath and exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of everything he had been through. So this is the truth, he thought. The price of survival, the price of peace, the memories, the pain, the betrayal. They had all shaped him into someone he never thought he would become. With one last look at the city, he turned, walking away from the past. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, Adrian was ready to face it. I'm not the man I was, he realized, and that's enough. The silence hung in the air, a quiet resolve settling in his chest. The world would continue to spin, but for Adrian, this was the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. The world had stopped spinning. Adrian stood by the window, staring out at the empty streets below. The city was quiet, a stillness that felt unnatural after the chaos. No more gunfire, no more shouting, just silence. So much lost, he thought, watching the first light of dawn break through the clouds. It was a new day, but the past was still fresh in his mind. What's left now? His hands were still stained with blood, his mind weighed down by decisions that could never be undone. The world outside seemed unchanged, yet Adrian knew nothing would ever be the same for him. His life, his choices, they were his own, but the cost had been high. He closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the world that had once been his, now just a distant memory. Was it worth it? He wondered silently, the question lingering in the cold air. Adrian walked slowly through the empty streets, the weight of each step heavy with finality. The remnants of the battle were scattered in his mind, pieces of a life he could no longer return to. I've left everything behind, he thought, his footsteps echoing in the silence. He looked up at the sky, the clouds parting as if the world was giving him space to breathe. There was no one left to fight, no more enemies to face, only the future, uncertain, yet his to claim. I can't change the past, he realized, his voice barely a whisper. The decisions had been made, and now all he could do was move forward. Slowly the weight of it all started to lift, replaced by a quiet understanding. It's over, he thought, but it's not the end. Adrian stood in front of the small, worn-out house, the place where everything had started. He remembered the voices, the laughter, the warmth, before it all came crashing down. He hadn't been able to save it. He hadn't been able to save them. A voice echoed in his mind, soft and familiar. It's not about winning, Adrian. It's about surviving and finding your peace. Father Emilio's words haunted him, but they also grounded him. You were right, Adrian thought, standing tall for the first time in ages. He felt the weight of the old priest's teachings, now more than ever. Peace wasn't something to be fought for. It was something to be found, quietly, within. The streets had returned to normal. People walked by, oblivious to the changes that had taken place just days before. Life was moving on. As it always did, Adrian watched the faces of strangers pass him by, each of them with their own story, their own battles. It's not over, he thought. It never is. But Adrian was no longer the man who had fought for power. He had learned that peace wasn't given. It was earned, and it came with the understanding of what had been lost along the way. The city had moved on, but he would carry the lessons with him. The world had changed, but he had too. Adrian stood at the edge of the city, looking out over the horizon. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Everything had led to this moment, not the fight, not the pain, but the understanding. He had done what he could. He had survived. It's over, he whispered to himself. The words were final, but they weren't heavy. They were liberating. The journey had shaped him, but it had also left him free. He turned, walking away from the city, his steps steady. There was no need to look back. Peace must be earned, he realized, but redemption is a gift. He walked into the setting sun, leaving behind the shadows of the past.